After playing a game for some hours, I remember seeing some family members shake their hands to then take a break. At first, I thought it was some kind of celebratory pump until I finally asked, "What are you doing?" They told me their fingers were getting tired from pressing the buttons too much. I was confused. How can your fingers get tired? I can play this all day and I would be completely fine. That is until I started playing an early bullet hell shooter called 1943. And, hoo boy, I felt it then. I really liked playing this game, but it was the first game I actually had to pause because my thumb started to get tired. In this game, you had to constantly mash B to fire. You couldn't hold it. If you did, it would power up a shot instead. And with enemies swarming you all the time, unless you were on the boss, it wasn't a good idea to charge up a shot. My uncle did notice me getting tired though, so later brought over his NES Max and NES Advantage. Forgive me if you like this, but I tried various games using the Max and it never felt right. The analog always felt broken since it wasn't self-centering, and you had to push it to the edge for the character to actually move, which... Maybe my uncle's NES Max was broken, but I hated this thing. Even when just using the outside to move my character, it didn't always register. Its turbo was cool though. As for the NES Advantage, unlike most turbo controllers that only allowed you to switch turbo on or off, the NES Advantage had a knob which allowed you to adjust the turbo speed. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it made a huge difference for some games. Some games didn't register every input if the turbo was set to high, which actually made shooting slower than if you were to just mash the button yourself. Other games limited how many of your shots can be on screen at once. So if it only allowed up to 3 of your shots to exist and you fired too quickly, you'd have to wait until your shots either hit something or despawn off screen, leaving you open for enemy attacks. With this knob, I could tune the turbo just enough to avoid missed inputs or spread my shots more evenly without the need to constantly press B. And if a game handled max turbo just fine, I'd crank that sucker up to 11 and start blasting. 1943 already felt like a fantastic arcade port, but playing it on the NES Advantage made it feel like I had the arcade sitting in my living room. The only downside I can think of for the Advantage was the joystick. For games like Bomberman 2, Pac-Man, Punch-Out, 1943, and Jackal, it felt amazing. I've always wanted an Atomic Punk machine. I've gone to various auctions looking for one, but as a kid, being able to use an Advantage while playing Bomberman 2, this was a very nice substitute. However, for games like Super Mario Bros., Mega Man, and Castlevania, it just never felt right. Those games required quick and precise movements, and the joysticks had just enough travel until an input is registered to make it feel sluggish. So I would stick with a regular NES controller for most other games. Thankfully, third-party controllers existed which offered a nice middle ground with 3 turbo settings: off, medium, and max. It wasn't quite as flexible as having a dial, but it worked well enough, and these days when I go back to play my NES games, I grab this controller to play most of the games instead of an official NES controller. When I was a kid though, I didn't have this choice, and the Advantage wasn't mine. All I had was a zapper and a couple NES controllers, so I either dealt with a sore thumb or asked to borrow the Advantage again, which he wouldn't always bring. So instead, I started experimenting with different ways to hold this controller. I tried switching hands, holding it upside down, holding it backwards, using the Wiener technique, or laying it down on my lap to then tap the buttons. The last one did feel the best, so I stuck with it for a while. A few cousins laughed at me, but hey, it's comfy and no more sore thumbs when I play 1943 or Sky Shark. Then, one day when playing, I believe, Castlevania 3, I felt like this wasn't precise enough, so I lifted the controller a bit to use my thumb for the D-pad, and for whatever reason, it clicked. This felt right. Maybe it was because I had smaller hands, but I stuck with this grip all the way until I got a PlayStation 1. Looking online, it turns out this grip has a few names: the arcade grip, claw grip, or the fighter grip, which a lot of people used and still do when using 6-button controllers in fighting games. Or less if, like me, all you had were these guys to play Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter on the Genesis. Which was a bit awkward because in Street Fighter, to switch stances from punching to kicking, you had to tap start. And because of this, there were many moments I'd try to throw a Shoryuken only for Ryu or Ken to throw a kick instead. It wasn't ideal, but it was something I alongside other people had to deal with, and using this grip helped a lot. The only time I use this controller grip anymore is when I go back to play some of my older consoles, or if a game expects you to mash a button over and over again without giving you an accessibility option to just hold the button instead. Thankfully, on PC, there are ways around that. Steam allows you to remap your controls to add toggles for repeated button presses, which has been very helpful with some games. As for consoles though, they each have their own accessibility options, which, for what they provide, are nice, but controller-wise, it's very basic, only allowing you to swap the buttons around. Which is why on rare occasions, at least on consoles, I still find myself going back to this fighter grip.